Have you ever wondered why silence feels heavier for some and liberating for others? Why some people cannot stand a quiet room, while others breathe easier when the noise fades away? This world often tells you that to be valuable you must be visible, to be loved you must be loud, to be accepted you must be surrounded by many. But what if that isn't the truth? What if solitude is not your weakness, but your most hidden strength? You may not be the person who seeks the spotlight, nor the one who thrives in constant chatter. You may be the observer, the dreamer, the quiet mind sitting in the corner while the world runs its endless race. And though society calls you loner, the truth is, you carry within you a depth that others often run from. You see, this video isn't meant for everyone. It's not for those who fear silence. It's not for those who cannot stand their own reflection. It's for you, the one who has felt invisible, misunderstood, and yet still carries within a flame that refuses to be put out. The question is, are you willing to see your solitude as your gift rather than your curse? People have always struggled to understand those who walk alone. The quiet person in the corner, the one who does not chase noise or cling to the safety of groups, is often mislabeled as someone who is weak, strange, or broken. Society has built an image of strength around visibility, around the ability to dominate space, command attention, and gather followers. If you are surrounded by people, if your presence fills a room with laughter and approval, then you are praised. But if you choose silence, if you choose distance, people often assume you are incomplete. They do not stop to ask whether silence is chosen, whether solitude is not a symptom but a conscious path. The misconception begins here, confusing stillness with emptiness, mistaking independence for a lack of belonging. It is a projection of their own fear because most people cannot sit alone without feeling the weight of their own thoughts. They need the distraction of others to avoid the mirror of themselves. And when they see someone who has the courage to face that mirror, they call it weakness, when in truth, it might be the purest form of strength. The conflict is not only social, it is deeply psychological. Machiavelli wrote that those who depend too heavily on others for approval give away their own power. And yet the majority of people live trapped in this invisible prison, trying to earn worth from applause, likes, recognition, or constant companionship. They think that to be alone is to be unwanted, but what if to be alone is to be free? This contradiction runs like a current through human life. People spend their energy performing for others while quietly resenting the fact that no one ever truly sees them. They run from solitude, but in running they lose themselves. The loner, on the other hand, is someone who has stopped running. Perhaps not by choice at first. Maybe pain, rejection, or betrayal pushed them into isolation. But once inside the silence, they discovered something different. They realized that the self can breathe without constant validation. That realization is terrifying to those who have never known it, because it reveals how dependent they truly are. And so, society disguises its envy as judgment, labeling the solitary as antisocial or flawed, when in fact they may be the ones who are most awake. What people rarely admit is that solitude is not absence, it is presence. It is the space where distractions fall away and truths rise to the surface. But to the average person, such truths are unbearable. They cling to noise because silence whispers questions they don't want to answer. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly believe when no one else is guiding me? Do I love myself? Or have I been building my life on the desperate need to be loved by others? These are the questions solitude asks, and the loner, by simply existing in their natural state, becomes a mirror for others who refuse to face those questions. This is why the misconception is so strong. People would rather call you broken than admit that your way of living exposes the cracks in theirs. They laugh at solitude. They dismiss it. They call it loneliness because it protects them from the truth that they are terrified of themselves. And yet, isn't it ironic that those who laugh the loudest often feel the emptiest when the laughter dies down? There is also a cultural dimension to this misunderstanding. Across history, the figures who shaped philosophy, art, science, and even revolutions were often people of solitude. They were the observers, the thinkers, the wanderers. They saw differently precisely because they were not blinded by the same illusions that captured the crowd. And yet, in modern times, society has built an obsession with hyperconnection. We are told that to be constantly available, constantly interacting, constantly surrounded by faces and voices is to be successful. Loneliness is treated as a disease, solitude as an error to be corrected. But how strange it is that in a world of billions, people feel lonelier than ever. Perhaps the misconception lies in confusing company with connection, in thinking that quantity of relationships equals quality of life. The loner understands what society does not. You can be surrounded by many and still be starving for meaning. You can be followed by thousands and still feel invisible. Solitude, therefore, is not emptiness, it is clarity. It is choosing to drink deeply from your own well instead of drowning in shallow waters. The conflict becomes personal when you realize how deeply the pressure to conform runs. From childhood, people are rewarded for being social, for fitting in, for joining the group. The quiet child is told to speak up. The solitary teenager is urged to make more friends. The independent adult is asked, "Don't you get lonely?" This constant push creates a stigma that solitude equals failure, that those who do not conform to the social rhythm are somehow lacking. But ask yourself, why is there fear in being different? Why is silence more uncomfortable than meaningless chatter? The answer lies in conditioning. People are conditioned to seek external confirmation before internal stability. And those who step away from this pattern, those who dare to walk alone, threaten the illusion that everyone else clings to. That is why the loner is often criticized, mocked, or pitied. It is not because they are weak, but because they remind others of the freedom they themselves are too afraid to claim. The misconception is not a misunderstanding of solitude, but a defense mechanism against the truths solitude reveals. There is another layer to this conflict, the way power operates. In social dynamics, the one who does not need the group often holds the greatest leverage. Think of it. If your worth is tied to whether people like you, then you are controlled by their approval. But if you can stand apart, if you can be whole in your own silence, you cannot be manipulated so easily. This is why the loner is feared as much as they are misunderstood. They cannot be bent by the usual pressures. They are not swayed by the hunger for attention, and this makes them dangerous in a world built on conformity. And yet, rather than admit this power, society cloaks it in negative terms, calling the loner awkward, antisocial, or cold. But these words reveal more about society's fear than about the individual, because deep down, everyone knows that to truly belong to yourself is the highest form of independence. And when you see someone living that truth, it forces you to ask, why am I not doing the same? That is the heart of the conflict, the discomfort of seeing someone free when you are still chained. Perhaps the greatest misconception of all is the idea that solitude is a prison. In reality, solitude is the door to liberation. It does not mean cutting off the world or rejecting human connection. It means building a foundation strong enough that you do not collapse without it. A loner is not someone who hates people. They are someone who has discovered that peace is not dependent on people. And that kind of realization cannot be understood by those who have never experienced it. That is why conflict arises, why loners are so often misunderstood. The world cannot categorize them. They do not fit neatly into the narratives of dependence, consumption, and validation. They are anomalies in a system that thrives on distraction. And so, society calls them outcasts. But what if the outcast is simply ahead of their time? What if the loner has not lost their way, but instead found the path most people are too afraid to walk? This question lingers because it exposes the truth. The conflict is not between the loner and the world, but between the world and its own fear of silence. There are moments in life that feel almost unbearable to describe. You sit in a crowded room, the voices around you fill the air, laughter echoes from every corner, and yet inside you feel like you are floating outside of it all, unseen, disconnected. People notice your presence, but they do not see you. They talk, they joke, they ask questions, but none of it reaches the core of who you are. And in that moment you learn something profound. Being surrounded does not mean being connected. Loneliness is not about numbers. It is about depth. It is about the gap between what you feel and what the world reflects back to you. Many loners know this experience too well. They understand the ache of invisibility, the silence that follows even in the midst of noise. And while others may interpret this as emptiness, the truth is, it is the beginning of awareness. It is the moment you realize that belonging cannot be manufactured by proximity. It must be something deeper, something rare, something real. Then there are the nights when silence presses down on you like a heavy weight. The world has gone to sleep, the streets are empty, and you find yourself staring at the ceiling, asking questions you cannot answer. Why do I feel so disconnected? Why do I carry so much within me that no one else seems to understand? It is in these hours that many loners discover the paradox of their existence, feeling too much, yet having no one to share it with. You may scroll endlessly through messages, hoping that one conversation will fill the gap, but they often fall flat, shallow, unsatisfying. And still, within that emptiness there is a strange flicker of something else. A realization that maybe the silence is not a punishment, but a mirror. Maybe the stillness is not hollow, but a space meant for you to meet yourself. What begins as discomfort slowly transforms into clarity. You realize that the very solitude you dreaded is also where you uncover who you really are. Sometimes the loner's journey begins in pain. Maybe it was betrayal, the moment you trusted someone with your heart and they shattered it without hesitation. Maybe it was rejection, the sting of being pushed aside, misunderstood, or dismissed for not fitting in. These wounds carve deep scars, and often they force people inward. The world interprets this withdrawal as weakness, but the loner knows better. What looks like retreat is often the first step toward transformation, because in that isolation you are no longer blinded by illusions. You start to see clearly who values you and who only wanted fragments of you. The painful realization is that many connections are not built on love or truth, but on convenience. And while that knowledge hurts, it also liberates. Because once you see the falseness, you can never go back to pretending. That moment of clarity becomes the foundation upon which inner strength is built. There are also moments of quiet revelation that shape the loner's path. You sit by yourself, maybe at a cafe, maybe on a long walk, maybe staring at the sunset, and something shifts. You feel, for the first time, that you do not need anyone else in that moment. You are not lonely, you are simply alone. And there is a difference. It is subtle but profound. Loneliness feels like a wound, like something missing. Being alone feels like breathing freely, like being whole. This transformation does not happen overnight, but every loner remembers the first time they tasted that freedom. It feels like stepping out of a storm into clear air. You realize that solitude is not an absence, but a presence. The presence of yourself, unfiltered, unmasked, and real. This is the kind of experience that shifts your entire perspective, teaching you that life is not about constant company, but about meaningful connection, including the one you have with your own soul. Of course, there are days when the weight of solitude returns. No path of transformation is without its struggles. You may long for someone who truly understands you, someone who can sit in silence with you and not feel the need to fill it with noise. You may feel the sting of seeing others surrounded by friendships or relationships that seem effortless, while your path feels heavier, lonelier, harder. But it is in these very comparisons that the deeper truth emerges. The loner begins to see that the quality of life is not measured by how many hands you hold, but by how authentic the bond is. A single honest connection, even if rare, is worth more than 100 shallow ones. This realization brings pain, but also clarity. It forces you to raise your standards, to refuse the superficial, to embrace the waiting, because you know now that your soul cannot survive on crumbs. It craves substance, it craves truth. Then there is the experience of being misunderstood. The loner often carries a world inside, thoughts, dreams, emotions, visions, that rarely find a safe place to be expressed. When they share, others sometimes dismiss it, mock it, or fail to grasp its depth. And so the loner learns the language of silence. They learn to hold their truths within, to pour them into writing, art, music, or simply into the quiet corners of their minds. This can feel isolating, but it also becomes a hidden strength. Because what others cannot see, you learn to see more clearly yourself. You learn that your inner world does not need constant external validation to be real. This is the birth of independence. Not the absence of longing, but the courage to carry your own depth, even when others cannot understand it. And while misunderstanding cuts deep, It also sets the loner apart, giving them the ability to perceive the world in ways that others overlook. And finally, the most relatable emotional experience for a loner is the moment of acceptance. The day you stop fighting your solitude. It may come suddenly, or it may arrive slowly, like dawn creeping through the cracks of a dark room. But when it comes, it feels like a release. You stop blaming yourself for being different. You stop envying the noise that surrounds others. You stop asking why you were built to feel so deeply, to stand apart, to walk your path in silence. Instead, you begin to embrace it. You see that solitude has not broken you, it has refined you. It has stripped away illusions, burned off the need for shallow approval, and revealed a strength that can only be forged in silence. This acceptance does not erase the desire for connection, but it anchors you in truth. It makes you realize that even if no one else fully understands you, you still belong to yourself, to your path, to the quiet strength that solitude has carved into your soul. There is a moment in solitude when the pain begins to shift into something else. At first, silence feels heavy, almost unbearable, like a shadow pressing on your chest. You want to run, to escape into noise, into distraction, into anything that makes you forget. But the loner who stays, who endures the silence long enough, discovers that beneath the heaviness there is a strange kind of light. It flickers faintly, like the first glow of a candle in the dark. This light is not given to you by the world, it is born inside of you. It is the quiet realization that you have survived every lonely night, every rejection, every misunderstanding, that despite the storms you are still here. Awakening does not come with fireworks. It comes with the simple truth that your scars did not break you, they shaped you. And in that realization you begin to understand that strength is not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it without being defined by it. The loner's awakening often begins in the places they once thought were weaknesses. The silence they once hated becomes their teacher. The solitude they once feared becomes their sanctuary. The scars they once tried to hide become proof of their resilience. It is a paradox. The very things that once made you feel broken are the same things that now make you unshakable. You realize that solitude has carved out space within you, space for depth, for clarity, for strength that others rarely touch. And though the world may still misunderstand, you no longer carry the same need for understanding. You no longer measure yourself by their approval. Instead, you begin to see that every moment you endured in silence was not wasted. It was preparing you for this awakening. The pain has become wisdom. The isolation has become vision. What once felt like emptiness is now the ground on which your true self stands. Strength for the loner is not loud. It does not shout. It does not demand. It does not need to be seen. It is quiet, steady, unshakable, like the roots of an ancient tree that go unseen beneath the surface but hold the entire structure upright. This kind of strength is rare in a world obsessed with appearances. People confuse noise with power, forgetting that real power often moves in silence. The loner knows this because they have lived it. They have carried pain without broadcasting it, endured rejection without losing themselves, and walked alone without collapsing. Each step they took in solitude became a step deeper into themselves. And though the world could not see the battles fought in silence, the loner knows the truth. Strength is not what others witness. It is what you carry when no one is looking. This awakening is not about showing the world you are strong, but about knowing without doubt that you already are. The imagery of awakening often feels like light breaking through cracks. Imagine being surrounded by darkness, believing for so long that it was endless, only to notice one day a faint shimmer breaking through. At first it seems fragile, like it could vanish at any moment. But as you move toward it, it grows brighter, steadier, stronger. This is what it feels like when a loner realizes their solitude is not emptiness. It is illumination. It is the space where they finally meet their true self, without masks, without pretense, without fear. That light does not need permission to shine. It was always there, waiting for you to stop running and finally see it. Awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have always been, beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the illusions. It is about reclaiming yourself, piece by piece, until you stand whole again. You stop contorting yourself to fit in, stop chasing people who never saw you, stop apologizing for your solitude. Instead, you begin to honor yourself. You begin to see your silence as sacred, your scars as sacred, your journey as sacred. The awakening teaches you that your worth was never missing. It was only hidden beneath the noise of doubt and the weight of other people's opinions, and once you uncover it, you carry it like armor, invisible but unbreakable. Loners often find strength in the imagery of scars. A scar is proof that you were wounded, yes, but it is also proof that you healed. It is a reminder that the pain you thought would destroy you became part of the story that shaped you. Each scar, visible or invisible, becomes a mark of survival, a testament to resilience. And instead of hiding them, the loner begins to wear them as quiet emblems of their strength. They do not flaunt them, but they do not deny them either. Because in the end, scars are not shame, they are memory. They remind you that you have endured, that you have walked through fire and emerged on the other side, tempered like steel. And the loner, more than most, understands that strength is not found in avoiding scars, but in carrying them with dignity. Awakening is realizing that what you once called weakness is, in truth, the evidence of your power. What emerges from this journey is a kind of peace that cannot be shaken. The loner no longer seeks to escape solitude because they have discovered its gift. They no longer see silence as an enemy because it has become their ally. They no longer view their scars as chains but as symbols of freedom. This awakening is quiet, but it transforms everything. It gives the loner the ability to walk into any room, any situation, any storm, with a calm that unsettles those who depend on noise to feel alive. It is the kind of inner strength that does not need to be proven because it is self-evident. The loner learns that true power is not domination, not approval, not recognition. It is self-possession. To belong wholly to yourself is to be unshakable. I believe self-possession is the greatest healing there is to be, and once you awaken to that truth, no amount of misunderstanding, no amount of solitude, no amount of judgment can ever take it from you. The true revolution is not one that the world can see, but the one that unfolds quietly inside your own soul. So many chase validation, applause, recognition, thinking that when others finally see them they will feel whole. But what happens when the applause fades? What happens when the crowd leaves? You are left with yourself, and that is where the real battle begins. The loner knows this truth because they have lived it. They have walked through the silence and realized that the most powerful transformation is not when the world celebrates you, but when you finally stop abandoning yourself. Awakening is not about proving your worth to others. It is about no longer needing to prove it at all. It is about realizing that you do not have to earn the right to exist, to breathe, to be. The moment you stop seeking permission from the world is the moment you take back your power. This is the revolution that can never be taken from you. And this revolution is not glamorous. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not demand to be noticed. It is subtle, steady, like a fire burning quietly in the dark. Others may not even recognize it, but you will feel it in your bones. You will feel it when you wake up one day and realize you are no longer desperate for someone else's approval. You will feel it when rejection no longer defines your worth. You will feel it when the silence that once tormented you becomes the silence that heals you. That shift cannot be explained to those who have never walked the path of solitude. They may still call you a loner, still misunderstand you, still project their fears onto you, but inside you will know, and that knowledge will carry you. That knowledge will steady you. Because when you belong to yourself, the world cannot take that belonging away. In this place of inner transformation, you begin to see the world differently. You are no longer blinded by illusions of popularity, of status, of shallow success. You see the cost of living for the eyes of others, and you no longer wish to pay it. You see the fragility of people who cannot stand alone, who need constant affirmation to keep going, and you no longer envy them. Instead, you carry a quiet gratitude for the path that solitude has given you, because in walking it you have discovered something many will never touch: self-possession. You do not need to chase. You do not need to beg. You do not need to be seen to be real. This freedom may not look spectacular on the outside, but it feels like peace on the inside. And peace, once found, is more valuable than all the noise the world can offer. The loner discovers that the real wealth is not in being admired, but in being unshakably whole. There is also a tenderness that comes with this awakening, because when you learn to sit with yourself, to hold your own silence, to see your own worth, You also learn to see others differently. You stop expecting them to fill your emptiness because that emptiness is no longer there. You stop resenting them for misunderstanding you because you no longer need their understanding to survive. Instead, you begin to see others for what they are, souls on their own journeys, each carrying their own struggles, fears, and illusions. This compassion is born out of solitude because only those who have faced themselves deeply can see others without judgment. The loner, therefore, is not cold or detached as the world believes, but capable of a kind of love that is purer, freer, less dependent. It is love not rooted in need, but in wholeness. And that is the quiet gift of solitude. It strips away the illusions, leaving behind only what is true. As this revolution of the self unfolds, you begin to realize that you are no longer playing the same game as everyone else. You are no longer bargaining with your worth, no longer bending yourself into shapes just to be accepted. You walk differently. You speak differently. You move through the world with a calmness that unsettles those still trapped in the chase. People may still misunderstand you, but that no longer matters because the truth of who you are is no longer fragile, no longer dependent, no longer negotiable. You are anchored in yourself. This anchoring is the ultimate awakening. It gives you strength in storms, clarity in confusion, and peace in solitude. And it is here, in this unshakable belonging to yourself, that you find freedom. The freedom that others are chasing outside, you have discovered inside. That is the quiet paradox of the loner's path. It looks like isolation, but it leads to liberation. So when the world calls you a loner, do not shrink from it. Do not treat it as a curse or a flaw. Let them call you what they will, because the truth is, you have found something deeper. You have discovered that solitude is not a prison, but a door. You have realized that silence is not emptiness, but a canvas on which you paint your soul. You have learned that your worth is not for the world to decide. It was always yours, waiting for you to claim it. This is the real revolution. Not fame, not recognition, not validation, but awakening. Awakening to yourself. Awakening to your inner strength. Awakening to the peace that no one can give or take away. And if there is a call to action here, it is not loud, not desperate, not demanding. It is simple, silent, and soulful. Stop running from yourself. Sit in your own silence. Claim your own strength, and know, finally, that you are free.